Japan is surrounded by many huge seafloor traces. Okinawa is not an exception. But the traces you are going to watch now are not only huge, but also very regular. We call them Okinawa parallel grids, or simply Okinawa grids. Needless to say, the first case made here is that those huge and regular traces are not natural but artificial ones. It would be extremely difficult to say that they are the results of natural activities such as volcanism, plate tectonics or ocean current. Only crazy people would seriously insist they were naturally made. Another case is that they are not man-made, that is, they are not the results of human activities. Of course, there can be some people who argue otherwise. I welcome different opinions as long as they are rational and coherent. Parallel grooves in themselves do not necessarily make the sign of artificiality. There might be two rivers running in parallel for a certain length. But if the two parallel grooves are not curved but straight as an arrow, you might think it is unlikely that they are natural. In nature, some bamboos can grow so straight that they are used to make arrows. But on geographical scale, straightness like an arrow is very unlikely in nature. If the two parallel grooves are not only straight but very long, for example, 30 kilometers long, do you agree that it is extremely unlikely that they came into existence by natural forces alone? Then, let me ask you another question. If the straight grooves of 30 kilometers long are not two but as many as 7 in parallel, what do you say? 7 parallel straight grooves with a length of 30 kilometers on the seafloor. And those parallel 7 grooves are all separated with about 9 kilometers intervals. Are they natural or artificial? It would not be easy, but still might not be impossible to insist that those 7 grooves are not artificial but completely natural. But we need good explanation in terms of science to show they were formed only by natural forces. If they are 100% natural, it should be understandable with natural science, such as, in terms of geology, plate tectonics, earth science or whatnot. Desperate naturalists often resort to a high-tech sounding trick to refute my videos. They say, those are digital illusions. There are in fact no such traces out there. Cover with a drape, count 1, 2, 3, and dramatically draw away the drape. Lo and behold. This is digital illusion trick. You can make anything in visual media invalid only by calling it digital illusion. Magical disappearance of the objective existence in a quack. Case settled. No sweat. Cakewalk. Ha 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 ha. Their argument is that such anomalies must be the results of some glitches in digital processing of Google Earth. According to them, this should be some kind of error. Simply because it would give you trouble explaining if what looks impossible really exists. According to them, the huge grooves exist by error only in digital information, not in real world. They say there's no corresponding three-dimensional object on the seafloor. You are fooled by digital errors. Nothing more, nothing less. This is the typical argument of digital illusionists. Recently they upgraded their digital illusion theory. They now reluctantly admit there are something solid and extraordinary out there on the seafloor. But this time they say those are the traces of sonar investigation. They insist that those traces are tracks of sonar ships working continuously. Those huge and regular traces are supposed to show the long journeys of sonar ships. They seem to think this sonar ship theory sounds more sophisticated than trawler ship theory and consequently more convincing. But they are completely unable to explain how linear depression 30 meters deep and 50 kilometers long is made by sonar, that is, sound waves. They ignore the request to explain how sonar technology can produce three-dimensional huge linear depression or protrusion on the seafloor. Their sound wave mining theory is, in fact, a heavily punctured inflatable boat, which poor ostrich heads desperately cling to. As you see in this video, it is impossible to ignore the length and the width of the grids, the depth of the grooves, the straightness of the grooves, and the equidistant regularity of the intervals. How can you deny the cross-section diagrams of the grooves and their measured depths? How can you deny the objective reality of the huge regular grid more than 50 by 50 kilometers? The size of the grids is impossibly huge. It's far beyond human standard. It's humanly impossible size. Do we have any similar precedents this size in human history? Once you admit the existence of these huge grids, you are faced with the next question, that is, whether they are man-made or not. And no matter whether your answer is affirmative or negative, the following question will pop up automatically. Then, who done it? It's a tough question, indeed. To our regret, this video can offer no concrete answer to such a fundamental question. Even if they were on the dry ground, these grid formations are too huge to see by the naked eyes from an airplane. But it is beyond all doubt that they exist on the seafloor of this planet even at this moment. They seem to have been there for a long time, at least for hundreds of years. And we humans have been almost unaware of them. There seem to have been no records or legends about such huge formations under the sea. There might be a history of unknown civilization on our familiar planet. They may happen to remind you here of lost civilization of Atlantis. But even if Atlantis civilization had really existed somewhere, it is believed to have sunken into the sea one day and perished. So-called Atlantis civilization perished in the sea because it was sustained by bipedal terrestrial animals. So, it's a human civilization after all either way. When it comes to Okinawa grids, there seem to be no sign of humanity in terms of environment, size, design and possible purpose. It seems that Okinawa grids were made on the seafloor from the beginning and like Atlantis. Okinawa grids are the strong evidence that suggests the existence of non-human civilization on this planet. That's unavoidable logical consequence. Okinawa parallel grids have very regular formation in themselves, indeed. Besides their regular formation, the rectangles of the grid are laid out very regularly in that each run composing the grid runs east to west or north to south. In other words, each line runs in parallel with either longitudinal lines or latitudinal lines. No diagonal lines, no oblique lines and no random lines. Even at the corners of rectangles, we see only right angles, no acute angles and no obtuse angles. Every line is aligned with longitudinal line or latitudinal lines. We are obliged to admit that Okinawa parallel grids are formed according to some intelligent design. The authors of the grids must have known well the difference of longitude and latitude of a planet. And these huge grids must have been purposefully formed squarely along with longitude and latitude. Purposefully, yes, with some purpose in mind, but we have no idea what purpose it is. But facing with such mind-boggling achievement, it might be pretentious to think that we might be able to understand its true purpose even if there is one.